Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of A Different Perspective, Raising Vibrations While Chasing Squirrels with your hosts, John Thunderheart and me, Beanie Man. And today's guest is Sonya Shannon, visionary artist, and John will tell a little bit more about Sonya.
Well, I met Sonya, God, I don't know how many years ago is it now, Sonya, that we met?
5 years, probably 2014. I remember, John, you were playing Didgeridoo before Colorado Springs Body, Mind, Spirit Expo opened.
Right.
Fall of 2014. It was the first time I did that show and the first time I saw you, and I was so excited by your sound and how you were opening that space for everybody.
Yeah, so almost 6 years now.
Wow.
Then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I've known Shannon about 6 minutes, so yay.
Yeah. Look at that. There's sixes, all these number sixes. It's about togetherness, family, you know?
Right? There you go.
Well, Sonya had a booth there at the show, and most incredible artwork. When you look at her pictures and the art that she's created, and you just stare at them, you go into another place. I mean, it's an invitation to step out of this dimension. That's how I look at her art.
No, I get it, because I'm looking at the painting behind her right now, and I know Sonya did that one, and I was like, I'm mesmerized. I'm just staring at it like, whoa. Oh! Wow, I didn't see that face in between because you were there.
I did on purpose. Not to hide this
You just like
angel.
that glowing, you have that like halo type thing going on.
Well, I actually, when I printed this one, I printed it to put it behind me because I wanted those angels behind me. This is actually one of my clients that I do custom higher self portraits for, and that's her in the middle. I'll just step aside again. She's truly an angel. This is a total earth angel, and these are all her, the other two angels. And we did the reference photography in her backyard I think it was in October, and it was so exciting to work with her because she had remembered two past lives, and as even her human self was evolving through those different lifetimes, her angelic self was also evolving. And that's why the angels are holding the sword in two different ways to sort of express the role that the angelic part of her that was watching over her earthly life was kind of doing different things at that time to protect her, to open up her powers. She's a really wonderful healer. And that's a lot of the people that I work with, whether it's an artwork that comes through me, and then I'm sort of guided to find who should be the model that can hold that message, or whether it's a customer that approaches me and says, hey, I want you to explore what I am. So
very cool.
Now, with that, since we're looking at the picture behind you, now, did you see this while you were working with her, and these visions came into your own head, or was this something that she explained to you?
No, I usually it's a process. With this particular one, I didn't really know how it was going to all unfold. I just knew what the elements were, and a lot of times, that's the way the message is communicated to me from the metaphysical spirit realm, or maybe from the higher self. But it's a really great question you asked, John, because generally, when I do a painting, there is often an initial vision. Like for the big artworks that I've done that weren't commissioned portraits, they've all started with a clear vision of this is what it's supposed to be. And then, through meditation and prayer, I find the person who's going to be the subject to carry that message. And then it's really almost like I can hold that image almost perfectly, identically in my mind, until I've done the best job that I can do with the tools and technologies that I have at my disposal. But with the private clients, often what I find is because their souls are all going through a huge, especially in this lifetime, they're going through a huge journey, and a lot of them are at really big moments of awakening and manifestation. I find that those ones are more complex for me to do. they're not as clear at the beginning, and some of them unfold as I'm working with the person and I get the instructions and the downloads as we're actually doing principal photography. But other ones, like some of them take 6 and 7 months before the whole vision materializes, and I have to go searching for all the different bits and pieces, you know, through the 4 corners of the world to be able to tell their story.
Wow.
I have chills just listening. It's like, wow. It's amazing. Which artist was it? I can't remember. Was it Van Gogh or I don't remember. But they're like, I have the dream and then I paint my dream. I don't know which one that was, but
I think Chagall is one of the artists that's known for working with dream space imagery. Marc Chagall, he's often got figures that are floating through space. Salvador Dali, the surrealist as well, would probably, I think the environments and the way he worked with warping 3-dimensional objects and stretching the scale of spaces. I think he's another very dreamlike artist that might be, I don't know, I've never heard the quote, but that's just a little bit that I know about those artists. So,
and it doesn't surprise me. It makes sense to me.
So did you, when you were growing up, did you always have this very vivid, I don't want to even call it imagination, but that plays into it, but like visionary artistic influences when you were growing up?
Yeah, John, that's such a great question. And also I like that you discern the difference between imagination, which I do have in spades, but also between what's quite different, which is really downloading and getting messages from, I call it messages from the divine. My spirit guides have never kind of introduced themselves, or some people know, they know all the angels by name and it's this one and that one. I've never had that experience, but I've always had the feeling of being in touch with an intelligence, a sort of a matrix of higher information. And it's almost like a portal that opens in my consciousness where I can often visually see it, but also I have, it's like standing outside of a landscape that is time itself and being able to see these great vast perspectives of movements and change on our planet and elsewhere in the universe. And I don't know if I've always had it. I mean, there are 2 things I'd love to share. The first one is when I was a pre-verbal infant, I remembered a past life death. And it was a very serene death. I was lying on a sort of outdoor hospital in, I think it was Asia, somewhere where it was a rainforest, like constant raining, maybe bamboo forest. And I could hear birds and maybe monkeys, some kind of animal playing out beyond where I was. And nobody spoke. I think it was some sort of monastery where they had silence. But they brought me hot tea and hot soup. I don't think I had any teeth left. And I couldn't sit up. But these people were so kind. And their kindness touched my heart. And when I was this little baby, I remembered this. And I had a feeling of, I just want to say, such profound gratitude and bliss. That's the only words I can use to describe it. And then the second thing from my childhood that I remember was when I was 11, I had a vision of my whole life, where I was going to go, some of the things that were going to happen on the planet, and what my job was. It was almost like I got this download of instructions. And at the same time, I went through the experience of dying, like coming out of my body and joining back into the oneness. And the weird thing was, there was nothing scary about it. It was, I think that when I do physically die this time, it's going to be just like, how could I have ever forgotten what this was going to be? Because it's the most natural thing in the world. It's more natural than living to die and to join back into that one. And I will say a third vision, which is not necessarily related to art, but just more of a prophetic experience that I had. I was about 15. And I had this, again, it was a download, where there were these very large, massive crystals, and there were people that were kind of doing something with them, sending out messages. And then everybody was going to have in their hand an individual crystal where they could send each other our thoughts. And we would also see colored light and sound, like I got music and colored light coming out of this thing. And then when I was in my, whatever, 40s or something, I held an iPhone and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I saw. I mean, what I saw in my vision was more organic, like it was more like a real crystal,
Right.
but it was exactly that. Like, look at text, we're sending each other our thoughts, and we each have one, and we can get music and video. And so that was just an interesting validation of the gift of seeing into the future. I've seen some dark things coming too, but our planet has to go through whatever it goes through.
Yeah,
So.
we're definitely in an evolution right now, and a revolution.
Totally.
Yeah, global one for our species, and also for the consciousness of the whole planet. And it's interesting because I was thinking about this before I knew we were going to do this interview, but I was thinking about the Mayan calendar, the date of, 2012, the ending of that Mayan calendar, the beginning of the next epoch. And then I was also thinking about the terminology of the Piscean age, which started to wane out, and the Aquarian age dawning around in the 60s, that the Hair musical with the song of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And then one of the clients that I just worked for, and I'll send you the artwork, her understanding of it was that there's an old earth and a new earth. And so it's different than old world and new world, which is more in the 3D, historical perspective of things. But this is almost like the old structures dissolving, new structures being formed. And even my husband, the philosopher and artist Timothy Binkley, I used to take his lectures when I was in New York working at the School of Visual Arts. He talked about the old paradigm being the pyramid structure. So you have a pharaoh or a king or some masculine figure at the top, and then all the layers of society down to the slave classes or the most impoverished classes. And that's sort of, which is also a corporate structure, is usually structured like that. And then how that was the old way, and then the new way is what he described as a web. So the web is more of a level playing field where everybody has access to all the information. We don't necessarily know which is true or not, but how reliable the source is, but we have access to it. And then we also have a voice, we have an opinion. And so it's this more lateral structure. And to me, those four different frameworks or ways of talking about it all describe the same, as you said, revolution and evolution that we're going through.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've been talking to quite a few people, and my girlfriend has been doing a lot of reading and watching different videos talking about the two Earths, in a sense, where we're the third dimension here, right? And that we're transitioning those who are working on themselves, working on their compassion, working on their love, their forgiveness, and all these are vibrating at a higher frequency, and will eventually move into from the third to the fourth to the fifth dimensional realm. And even though it'll be superimposed basically on this earth, there'll be two earths there. Those who are staying at the lower vibrations and those who are on a higher vibration. And I found that very interesting. And then, we got into discussions about, the different aliens and stuff like that, because, they're, what we call aliens, some of them are just beings that are already in that vibration.
Right. I think this is really fascinating theory. And what strikes me is that on one hand, the people that are in this metaphysical realm, we're all speaking about these, different dimensions, the 3D to the 5D and 6D and other dimensions even beyond that. Yeah. And, beings like enlightened masters being 7th and 8th and even up to 12 dimensional beings, right? Divine masters. But then the shadow side of that, which might be that other earth that we're talking about underneath, on the other side, I hear things about the deep state, about, these worldwide conspiracy theories, even about bioterrorism in the now, the threat that we have now with the virus. And so it's interesting how those two different perspectives are trying to both answer the same question of what's happening right now and why and where did it start and who's behind it, kind of thing, you know?
Right. But even with this, you know, the thought process of the bioterrorism and the deep state, you know, the one world order, all these different energies. But the bottom line is sometimes that solidifies the ability to go within.
Right, right.
Which means that we can start to shift because we're free on the inside. You heard meant that that's a book written, you know, many free on the inside. That no matter what goes on in the physical realm, inside we are the sovereign being.
Right.
And that we can make that shift no matter what's going on around us.
Right. And so many ideas just light up when you say those, you know, that thought. You know, I guess the main one for me that's the most important is the role of meditation, because that's become a huge part of my grounding in the work that I do to bring visions to people and do life readings and life art, you know, through the higher self portraits. And, you know, I started seriously meditating hopefully every day now. You know, I often sometimes miss days, but I try to do it every day. And I started probably 20 something years ago. And I've slipped into that state that's called shunya, which is where there's a complete stillness. There's no thought at all. There's a complete alignment with that inner core of love vibration, of love energy. It's impossible to really describe this experience in words. It's something that if you're ever blessed to be able to go and have that experience. And for me, it didn't come through trying, like there was no effort. It was just regularly, day after day, year after year, doing these very long, sometimes 62-minute long meditations, sometimes doing a whole day or a whole week of meditation, and then opening up and practicing getting into the neutral mind. Because I think we have, you know, in the sort of Kundalini yoga path, which is the path that I walk, they talk about these 10 light bodies of consciousness. And so among those 10 bodies, we've got our soul body, which everybody knows that's eternal and goes on after this planet. And we've got our physical body, which is from this planet and is going to stay here. And while it's here, it's kind of this eating and pooping machine that kind of contributes the whole cycle of how things work.
I don't do the eat. I only eat. No.
Yeah, you only eat. No pooping from you. But you know, that's the law of how we get to have this body, the physical body. But in between that soul body and the fifth body of the physical body, there are these 3 mental bodies. So the first one, you can see these in animals too, the first 2 of them. There's like a negative mind, which is the protective mind that warns, okay, this is dangerous, run away. You know, that's sort of the root of fear, right? And kind of looking out for our highest good. And then there's a positive mind, which is like, oh, that looks interesting. Let me go over there. I might find some food. I might find some, you know, somebody to befriend. And that's called the projective mind, where we're projecting out based on something that we're seeing and trying something with hope. So negative would be pessimistic, you know, positive would be optimistic. It's just another set of words to characterize them. But then there's this third mind, which is actually physically located in the heart. And that's the neutral mind. And the neutral mind's neither positive nor negative. It's not indifferent.
Right.
It's a neutral place where, to me, that's the portal that we access the higher realms from. And so a lot of the practice of sitting and breathing, pranayama, you know, getting very quiet, starting to slow down everything in the body. I don't believe there's any such thing as turning off your thoughts. Like if people are telling you, oh, you just have to stop thinking. Well, you can't stop thinking any more than you can stop digesting. Your brain is an organ. Yeah, it's like designed to churn out thoughts. But when we slow down the breathing and slow down, that slows down the heartbeat. It slows down the digestion, and it slows down the thoughts. And that's where mantra and all the other stuff comes in. Like if you keep training your brain to go to one single mantra, eventually it goes into that place of bliss, that place of the neutral mind. And that's kind of the spontaneous experience I had when I was 11. Was a little bit like just, it was more of an out of body experience, but it was also very much just going into that oneness where the individual self, the illusion of that is just not there. And there's just the matrix of all creation and all bliss.
So I would gather then that was really the igniting of your, I don't want to just call it artisticness. The energy of creation flowing through you.
I would say that was very key. I mean, shortly after I had that experience, I read Lord of the Rings, and I thought I wanted to be a writer because I loved that story. I loved the use of fantasy to talk about very difficult subject matter. I mean, I don't see fantasy as escapism. I see it as a framework for explaining things that logic and the regular 3D world can't give us. But yeah, that experience was really big. I mean, I also, similar to Beanie and I were chatting beforehand, talking about left brain, right brain, scientific versus artistic, and so on. I have pretty balanced aspects of both. And when I was in high school, it was a real tug of war because I was very drawn to sciences and maths, geometry. I was 2 years ahead in school in those topics, but I loved the art, and it was a very tough decision to be an artist,
I tell you, the struggle is real.
Yes.
Yes, it's real.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So
And then
true.
I ended up, I was extremely lucky that I didn't even know how great the school was that I went to, but I decided to study classical animation, which is animation drawn by hand. And I went to Sheridan College, which is in Oakville, Ontario, Canada. I went to the international program. And I mean, one of the kids in my class won the Oscar for Best Animated Short that year, John Minnis. That was incredible. And, so I had a super education, even though in those days that was just a community college certificate. It wasn't a proper degree. And then I was trying to find work as an animator, which in the early 80s was tough to do. And I went ahead and did computer animation, which all my other artist friends were like, they couldn't stand the computer. And it was really hard because everything I'd learned to do with my hand, I had to remap it into writing lines of code. I mean, that's how everything was done in the early 80s. And, I felt like I had achieved a level of mastery in the traditional visual arts. And then it all got wiped out and I had to learn everything from scratch in 2D and 3D animation on the computer. But that led me to go from Toronto to New York, and then that led ultimately to teaching all over the world. And then everything fell apart, and then I went through about 10 years where I was really lost. And after that time, I kind of had a moment where I said, okay, there's nothing left for me to do but fall backwards into being a fine artist. I never thought I was going to be a fine artist.
Would you consider that the surrender?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a surrender, but it was also kind of like stepping into the right pair of shoes, because that's what really fits me. And yet I was so afraid. I was afraid I wouldn't be good enough, or, I grew up sort of with that, everybody has that, starving artist in the garret, vision. And I thought, oh no, that's going to be it. So I've had to do a lot of work around, money and abundance and so on. And, but really, the process of creating the art is a stepping aside. It's like I just erase myself. It's almost like I give over my hands, my eyes, everything to the higher being. And I'm almost in a state of meditation when I'm creating. And it's not coming from ego. It's not driven by like, oh, let me make this really good. And, it's sort of the opposite of that. It's like, let me serve, let me try to get even slightly close to this incredible vision, or honoring the clients that come to me. Their souls, their lives, their stories are just, I can't even put into words how deeply moving it is to work one-on-one with people. And it is a surrender. And I feel very much a servant to the divine.
Yeah. It's also very liberating, though, I feel.
Yeah, because the ego, self-will, when we push, to get a certain result, is so disappointing because it seldom happens. And also it's a misplaced, when even if we succeed through self-will, my experience with that is that, that's not really the true place of celebration and gratitude. It's really, to me, it's very spiritual. So.
Love
Yeah,
that.
I agree with that. It's interesting. For the past year, in almost, I'd say 90% of the readings that I do for people, for me, when I do it, like if I have numbers on some of the cards that come up, the number 2, right? For me is the number of creativity. In numerology, it's number 3. But I think the other night, I was thinking, why number 2? Why is that the creativity? Because your second chakra is
Right.
the center of creativity. And I was like, oh, that's why. And I get the number 2s coming up often, especially for the people who are stuck in their lives. And I get it multiple times in their readings. And I was having, through my meditation, a conversation with Spirit, and they told me that the way this world is going to transform is through people honoring that energy of creativity within themselves, whether it be singing, dancing, painting, writing, whatever. That increases the vibration. That, allows you to join the oneness of that divine.
Mm-hmm.
And, like when you're in that creative space, aren't you joyous? You're like you're glowing. Would people say that?
Absolutely. And I love what you just said, John, about the importance of the second chakra and awakening to your own expression, your own connection with the divine. I mean, that's really, we talk about the creator, right? That created the whole of the universe and all the things that are in it. And then we each have, on a physical level, that procreative ability. So that's the sexual chakra. But it's also the chakra of water. So the water element, is, that flowing and that connection, that cyclical thing, which really connects us with the divine. And I totally agree. I think now that a lot of people are doing this stay at home or lockdown or whatever it's called, this is really great for the ones that have a chance and have the focus to go ahead and make that music, do that dance, make that artwork, do the pottery or the sculpture, plant a garden, like whatever it is that feels creative and life-giving to you. That's a perfect medicine for right now.
And I love seeing it. It's like in my group, that I started on Facebook. I have so many people now, they're sharing, like they're doing music, they're sharing their live videos, and and that's like people are starting to garden. It's like, hey, I'm working on this and I'm doing this, and having different ideas of doing things that they've always done, but because of the restrictions we have right now, they come up with different ways of doing things, and it makes my heart sing. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of diversity, like so many like individual thoughts, individual approaches. I mean, I celebrate the diversity that's on the planet, because through all those different ideas, we will find solutions as a species, for how to deal with the problems we've created.
Yeah, most definitely. I always, tell people that, we have our truths, right? Each one has their own individual truth. We may have, say, our country's truth, our group's truth, and then our personal truth. But anytime we intermix with each other, our truths change, right? The more information we have, the more access to things visually, the written word, etc. Our old truths fall away unless we, are the resistant type of person, the Puritan, this is the way it is and that's all it's going to be. But I think this coronavirus is also a freeing energy. It's not just a negative. Even if it had these negative intents, it's going to, I believe it, I really feel it's going to become a positive because of exactly what is happening to the stay at home. For people who are starting to explore. They're talking at the dinner table instead of everybody being on their phone all the time. They're forced to interact now instead of staying completely isolated.
Yep, I agree. And I think even though that virus itself, what it's doing is not very positive on the health level and on the death toll worldwide, But I look at it as like, there's so much good coming out of this right now. And I think there's more good coming out of this than there's the negative, at least from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And it makes my heart sing. I'm like, this is so good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. The kindness that it's bringing out from people, and also just the topic that you've raised between the two of you, Beanie and John. What comes to mind is color. That when we have, the happiness matters.
Oh, here we go.
Your colors on your head.
It's all backwards on the screen here.
Yeah, it looks the right way around to me. But color. I did a piece that ended up in the Guggenheim called Josef Albers' Interaction of Color, and of course, Josef Albers was one of the big Bauhaus artists, and he created these color squares, and it's all just exploring how colors appear to change when you put them beside other colors. They lose their identity, or they shift, and it becomes very interesting to try and discern, wait, which is the same color here if you have this matrix with a number of different colors.
Love
and
that.
So that's very much that idea of how our truth shifts when we hear other people's point of view. Like even in my own family, we have people on both sides of the different political parties, or different aspects of what's most important in life, what are the values. And I just try to keep my mind open. I try to actually look at everything without judgment, without reaction. It's hard to do sometimes because, we all have buttons that get pushed, but
no,
I think, really never. But I think if you can, like what I try to do is I try to get onto that frequency of love, how much I love this person who's in my family who thinks really maybe very differently than myself, and just open up to it and look at it and explore, and just with a kind of neutral, curious approach, like, and then trying to understand, like, why would that be the most important thing? Why is that the way that they see it? And honor it. Like they have the right to think and believe and know what their experience has taught them. And I think that level of respect is also important as we go forward, because
very important.
Otherwise we're going to just kill each other. We're going to vibrate on hate and difference and, get out our guns and do all that stuff. And I'm not about that. I'm about celebrating those differences and learning from them, and just keeping my mind as open as I can to the human experience and what does that look like.
I love that. And then and that is really key, is like, be open. It's like, it may not agree with your belief system, but that doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's right. But it's easy to kind of want to join one side, cheer for this team and boo for that team. Like it, I think that's actually in the Transformation Oracle card deck, which I channeled in 2014. There's a card called Immigration. And
funny that you have that on hand, John.
The
original.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have mine here too. This is actually the diamond rainbow version. I'll see if I can find the card. Well, I'll send you the artwork to include, but there's an immigration card, which is in air. So it's to do with the mind.
Yes. And that's the native gentleman.
Native American. And let me see. Here he is. Okay. So this was a young man who grew up on the Cheyenne reservation in Southeast Montana. And he, part of him is like how you see on the one half, the ancient, connected to the native ways, connected to the native roots. And the other part of him works at McDonald's and has a kid, and he lives in a trailer. So it's completely divorced from what his ancestral, culture and way of life would have been. And this card is really about going and living on the other side, like joining the opposite team, the one that you booed and hated and cheered against, judged maybe, or said they're wrong, I'm right, and trying to walk in those shoes and see what does the world look like from that point of view. So it is a kind of immigration. It's an immigration of ideas, of thought structures, of opinions, and beliefs. And I think that's really a timely thing for us all to consider now.
Oh,
absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, it's funny. I that was one of the first pictures that struck me when in your booth. that you had it up when you first, I guess, unveiled it. And it was, to me, when I was looking at that, and I was like, it's the blending of the two worlds. That's what I saw, Matt, right there. You know, 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the past, but he's able to transverse both sides.
Right.
You know, he's able to assimilate the modern and the traditional within himself. And I felt, I just, you know, it struck me. I mean, it really, that particular one, I mean, actually almost all your artwork is just, you know, draws you right in. But that one, it was so real, because in many ways, that's how I always felt. I felt like, you know, my feet were always across the line between the world, you know, to spirit and to this world. Because, you know, I've always been connected since I was a little kid. I didn't know I had psychic abilities or any of those type of things until much later, you know, 18, 19 years old. But I always felt that I was, you know, walking through spirit, even as a little kid.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that duality, or, you know, the migration from the known to the unknown is very much what we need as we go from 3D into 5D. I think there are so many of the light workers like yourself, and you know, many of the people that are in the metaphysical community who were born in our whole lives, we've been half in that metaphysical world and half here. And so there's already a lot of familiarity, but there's been a lot of, culturally, it's a taboo, you know, in certain contexts to talk about it, or you're considered mentally weird or ill or crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, one of my friends went through absolute hell. Like, you know, they used to like zap you with what's that called, electroshocks. But she was so gifted, like, you know, back in the day. And we've come a long way to,
thank God,
you know, allow and tolerate people to have the gifts that they have and to be who they are. And you know, just across the board, whatever those gifts are. So,
well, you know, it's all shifting, because I have sometimes clients who come who are from that religious right, you know, fire and brimstone, and, you know, any of this stuff is wrong, but they're coming for a session, and then when they have it, they're like, this is not what I've been taught.
Oh, I know. It's a really interesting moment. And I connected with, there's a former church. It was an evangelical church down in Pueblo that's now become the Awakening Center. And the preacher there, Aaron Tomlinson, you know, he started to wake up. He started to go through his own huge metaphysical transformation. And he brought many of his congregants along. Of course, there was a big controversy, and a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, he's gone over to the devil's side, and, you know, kind of that black and white thinking where they can't, it's like, this is right and this is wrong, because it's so scary to go out onto the fringes, you know, and to kind of blend between, there's a huge spectrum of what can be considered good and what can be considered evil, you know.
Well, it's the mentality of, this is the way it's always been.
Right. And again, it's that immigration where we can have our roots in the old world, but then we have to leave a lot of that behind, maybe all of it, maybe most of it, as we go forward into this new time. We have to let go of what's always been.
Now, that one picture that you have of with the luggage, the woman.
Right.
Do you have a picture of that?
Well, it is the Simplicity card. I'll send you a picture, and hopefully you can edit it in.
Yeah.
It's in the earth element.
Put it in the,
so it's actually this one here, the Simplicity card. Yeah.
Can you keep that held up for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you look at it, they see it leaving the old baggage behind.
Right.
Right, and the release.
Love that.
Each step being taken, they're shedding what they thought they were to what they truly are. That's the way I saw that. Ooh,
Yeah,
I
I
just
love it.
bumped my card and a card flew
got a
out.
card, a message. Just
Unfortunately, it's not your deck, but
okay, they're all good.
the Page of Earth.
Page
Good
of,
news about, this is for the world. Good news about financial matters, wanting to do something more challenging, a new area of study.
that's pretty awesome. That sounds amazing.
Perfect. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And yeah, that painting, it's so interesting because I did the principal photography for that painting on the same day as I did the one with the fire dancers. Do you remember that one, John? In the fire.
Mhm. Yep, that's
fire
the one that fires all above their head. And,
Yeah, with the planet
Mm.
Mars, like this burning away of everything. I did both principal photographies on the same day.
Oh, wow.
So the first one where she's dropping the baggage, we did that in one field, and then as the light shifted, I turned and did the fire dance in another field. And so one thing is, it's the same person, the single figure all the way through that whole painting where she's dropping her baggage. Some people think it's a lineup of different
no,
people.
I knew same
One-
person.
Yeah.
Getting
and I
the
think,
same, so to speak. Yeah.
yeah, that sort of came from animation where you have to, capture the movement of a character over time and turn them through space. And, of course I did that by hand originally. And I just, that was another one where I thought when I was young, I had seen a painting that was a bunch of people lined up with garbage bags, dumping them and getting into an airplane. And I thought I knew where that painting was created and who the artist was. And I've looked and looked and looked high and low, and I've never been able to find it again. So maybe it was one of those other things where there was some vision that I had that I don't know, but it felt like the right time. And that painting is definitely my best known and best seller of all the art that I've ever created. It's in the Golden Masonic Lodge in Golden, Colorado. There's a huge one hanging in the Mile High Church when you walk right before, it's in the main sanctuary before you get into the inner sanctuary. And then there's one in a women's shelter in downtown Denver. And I just think that painting, I've watched people see it for the first time. And it's kind of like what you said at the beginning, John, that somehow the artwork goes into their psyche and you can see it cracking them open. Like you can see them getting the message and their consciousness lighting up. And I believe that that's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to wake us up so that we can never look at something the way we did before, that we now have this other new, I know for me, one of the ones that was one of the paintings that really woke me up when I was a kid was Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night with Cypresses, and how he had painted the spirals of the sky, with those brush strokes, and how, the whole universe is a spiral, we're in a spiral universe. Time as we experience it is a spiral. Everything is spinning and turning. And how he put that into the sky, the energy of the sky, that changed my perception forever and showed me the power of visual art. And so I feel very honored that I could, first of all, see that vision. And then second of all, have tools and ability and time and a way to be able to manifest that so that it can help people. Even after this whole lockdown, or not lockdown, but the stay-at-home started in Colorado, I got an order from a gentleman who wanted a large copy of that painting for his home. And I just feel very grateful.
It's amazing. I love that. I'm like, wow, it's cool.
Thank you.
I'm going to go backwards maybe a little bit. Now, you had worked, well, let's just say that you had struggles being accepted. Was that, in the graphic art, or how would you call animation arts, and and how has that experience transformed you to this point?
Wow, John, thank you for that question. That's a really big one. Well, I mean, I'm 6 feet tall. When I was young, I looked like a fashion model. And in fact, I was a fashion model part-time. But I was working in a very brainy tech, male-dominated field. I mean, there were a couple of other women, but not sitting behind the computers. They were more the secretaries and support staff. So I feel that the main thing that I got from that time was what it is to be a pioneer. It was a pioneering field, 3D animation, computer generated special effects, programming, and trying to simulate reality through mathematics is basically what it is. So the field itself was pioneering, and then I was a pioneer working woman in a non-traditional woman's field, like, what is it, teaching, nursing, and there's something else, secretary, that were the traditional women's working fields. And so for me, I had to have a lot of strength. I learned to work, a lot of women from my generation, I was born in the 50s, we had to work, twice as hard as the men to hold our place or to try and rise up. So I think the good thing about that environment was it made me very strong. It made me very committed. It made me very curious. Like I taught myself. There was no instruction manual, and I was not part of the boys club. They were over there training.
Google it?
Sorry?
You couldn't Google it?
No, we didn't have internet yet. No internet yet. But yeah, there was kind of the boys club, and then there was me, and so I was pretty much on my own. And also I was very invisible. I'll tell you a story. My company at that time had 3 branches. One was in Toronto, one was in New York, which is where I was. I was first in the Toronto one and then transferred down. And then there was another one, the Paramount lot in Hollywood. And one day they had a competition for a story idea, storyboard. And it was among the 3 branches of the company. And whoever the winner was going to get $1,000. And they were going to make this little short animated film for a giant conference called SIGGRAPH, which is the special interest group in computing, the Association of Computing Machinery, special interest group in graphics. And so I thought, well, what do I have to lose? I sat down, I did my storyboard, and it was a vision of the earth, like a really out there thing. And I submitted it, and I walked into work the day that the winner was announced, and nobody knew who the winner was. It was like nobody recognized that person's work. And guess who it was?
You, of course.
Me. And I think people were really angry and upset because they wanted me to be the dumb bimbo, the pretty woman who was stupid because you can't be pretty and smart, like that stuff.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you can't be female and a good artist, like it was like not allowed, right? But it was such an affirmation that I was the real thing, because out of all those directors, out of all those talents, and we had some really talented people, I won,
Now wasn't that happened after you had that demotion?
Yeah, I was demoted before that happened. My self-esteem was terrible. I also, it was the pre-Me Too things, of course, there were all those problems as well. And I know it's hard to imagine for young women, but in those days, like if I would have spoken up, that would have been it. I would have been out of the industry. So you just keep your mouth shut, which I did. I kind of wish that I had been a stronger person, but I'm not. I'm a very sensitive person. So I just had to do it the way that worked for me, But then some of the other struggles were, just falling out of that industry. Like at some point it just, we had the dot-com bubble burst and 9/11 in New York.
Now what is the dot-com bubble burst? I've heard it. I don't know what it is.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. In the late 90s, right before 9/11 happened, there was everybody knows about Silicon Valley in California, but we also had Silicon Alley in New York. And that was the whole tech industry. So this was when things were really starting to take off. It was after the Cold War. All of the scientists that had been, working in NASA and JPL, which is the Jet Propulsion Labs, for the space race with the Russians, all of those flooded into the 3D computer animation special effects industry. And at the same time, we had the World Wide Web, which started in 1993, and the whole internet starting to take off, and the personal computers. So all of a sudden, computers went into everybody's homes. And so by the late 90s, where the economy was there was all this new software. Some of it was called vaporware because it never materialized, but angel investors were throwing volumes of money into technology to get this new industry off the ground. And so, but it's just like what happened with the real estate market later, like in 2007, 2008, when that bubble burst and all the inflated mortgages ended up getting just wiped out. The same thing happened that in the late 90s, that the market went from very bull to bear. That actually was a little bit earlier, but it was like all of a sudden the bottom fell out of the investing. And then right after that was 9/11. So everybody was out of work. If you worked in tech, in like at the turn of the millennium, you were going to be out of a job for the most part.
So that's when you lost your jobs?
Yeah, like everything, the bottom fell out. Our 9/11 story was we were working on a game engine using speech recognition, 3D animation. It was a big game for girls and women so that they could share secrets and use talking instead of thumb twitch, chasing little things on the screen, because girls like to tell secrets and so on. And we were migrating that engine to be adapted for, it's kind of complicated, but to people to use our tools with fuzzy logic to invest in their portfolios. And so we were trying to get this with Merrill Lynch onto one of the, I think it was the Xbox or one of the PlayStation, one of those platforms. And we had a meeting scheduled for 9:00 Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, at the top of the One World Financial, which is the neighboring building from the trade centers. And I'd never even been in that building. But the week before, they called us and said, hey, can we move your meeting up to the 7th, Friday the 7th, same time, same place? And we were like, sure, why not? So we went and had the meeting, which was great. But, bottom line was that building was smashed in the terrorist attack of 9/11. And Merrill Lynch closed down their emerging technologies division. And so we ended up coming out to Colorado to the safety of the mountains here.
Well, we're glad you came out here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, this is, I'm like, whoa. I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, and then we did go through the housing thing. We had a house, a beautiful house in North Boulder, which we lost in 2008 through foreclosure and bankruptcy and all that kind of thing that happened to many people. So, those wrecker balls were kind of what opened me up to be an artist, opened me up to my gifts. I think I'm like that seed of the pine cone of the Douglas fir tree, where it only opens up in fire. That would be me. I needed a lot of hard knocks to get real about who I really am.
But sometimes that just happens. We don't know our gifts, and we don't allow to step ourselves in our gifts until stuff really hit the fan, and we don't really know what else to be and to do.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think for me, when I try to figure things out with my head, it's a really bad idea because I can go around to those two negative and positive minds and just drive myself crazy. And it's almost like I'm better to fall backwards through my heart into what works for me. That's been my wake up. So
no,
yeah.
that's awesome. It's like for me, what I do, because I'm like you, my brain doesn't just stop.
Yeah,
it just keeps going. And a lot of times I have to sit there and I'm like, okay, where's this coming from? Is this my ego or is this my higher self, my heart? And I breathe down into my heart to connect with that part. And it's like, if it's there, if it feels coming from the heart, then I'm like, okay, so we're moving forward in this. If it's not, then it's like, I know it's the ego and I move on and ignore that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I have to, I do that too. I do the same type of check. I listen and I ask, is this me or is this, guidance?
Right.
Things.
Well, and that's, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's where divination tools really come in. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes a pendulum or divination card, or like oracle cards, or like all the good stuff, right? Yeah, and that, like, for me, that's how I can verify, I can discern, okay, this is really what I should listen to, you know. I mean, once my oracle kept telling me, always in fire, I would get absolute yes. I would do the yes, no, maybe spread. And there was a certain show that I was wanting to do, but not really wanting to do it because it hadn't worked out so well. And every time I asked, well, should I got, yes, absolutely, go. So I went, and the show, again, didn't seem like it was going to work out all that well. But at the very end, this couple came by, and they fell in love with the fire painting, and they were going to get it. And I said, oh, but wait, I have a huge one at home. How big is your house? You know, and they ended up buying this huge, you know, several $1,000 painting. And that got me through the whole winter. And that was actually the painting that the car, you know, in fire, it kept coming up, you know. So it helps to have those divination and metaphysical tools, or, you know, a good reader, a good psychic to help you know, hey, that's BS, that's your ego, versus no, that's the real thing. Because sometimes the real thing can seem kind of crazy out there, you know?
Well, yeah, it does. Because we're not trained, you know, personally to listen to that voice, that, you know, that guidance. We're told to listen to this authoritative figure.
Logic.
What's that?
Listen to logic.
Yeah, listen to that's not logical. And you know what's coming up a lot lately has been about not using the logical mind. It's been just following the mind, you know, the heart, the gut, that gut instinct, that gut feeling, and processing through there, because it knows before time. They've done actually scientific tests a year or two ago on that, and we've talked about that on other shows.
Yeah, I call it inspired action.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
It's like whatever comes through, and sometimes there's things that come through. It's like, you know, it's like, hey, you do this, and I'm sitting there going, what the fire truck? But then I do it, and it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, well, because you know the thing is that our energy can go out in all directions, and we are only looking at it in one.
Right.
And you know, when we just free ourselves and allow that guidance to flow through us and take action, you know, miracles happen.
Right. It's like, I call it take the blinders off people.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines, I think when I do something that's really true and aligned, I feel it in my whole body. Like I get goosebumps.
Yes.
You know? or I feel it in my heart. Like when I do the thing that maybe is the harder choice to make, but the more helpful for the higher good of the situation. Yes. And then I know it in my whole body. And it's like, I don't know where that response comes from, but I trust it more than just sitting there trying to figure out and reason and use logic and rationality to make all the decisions in my life, you know?
Yeah. Listen to your gut. I tell people all the time, it's like, listen to your gut. If it feels right, do it. If it feels wrong, don't do it.
Yeah, or when in doubt, don't. You know, if you have big doubts, probably better to listen to those, you know.
Right. Exactly. No, absolutely. This is awesome. I could talk this all day long.
Right.
I really could.
So we're probably getting down to the hour, aren't we?
Yeah, we're there.
All right. Well, Sonya, how can people get a hold of you?
Yes, thank you for asking. Well, I have 3 websites. The main website is my name with a hyphen in between. So my first name is Sonya, SONYA, hyphen Shannon, SHANNON.com. I also have, if you type in, again, with hyphens or dashes, you know, separating the words, higherselfportraits.com. That's where I have all the custom portraits. And I also have a print shop on there if people want some of the other prints. And then if you're a card reader into collecting tarot and oracle cards, I have the transformationoracle.com. So it's transformation-oracle.com. Yeah. And the sites are all 3 linked together. That's really the best way to reach me. Or by email, Sonya Shannon Artist with no hyphens @gmail.com.
And I'll put them all in the credits. Just send it to me and I'll put it all in the credits.
Yeah, and I'll send you artwork, the artworks we've mentioned, and maybe some other ones if you want to throw them in there.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah.
I love looking at art. I'm like, I'm a nerd.
You've got to go through her stuff. It's I like I said, I just get lost, or I should say I really get found.
And I totally get that. I can see myself doing the same thing.
Travel, it's the most incredible traveling, because I have such a great imagination that when I see that, I can walk into that picture with the person who let go of the suitcase and going in there and go into another dimension. I can go into another world by looking at that picture and the other ones. I just get so involved. That's why I love sci-fi and fantasy.
Right.
Because I can feel it. I can get into it. Sonya, before we end, what advice would you give to people listening? What inspiration or guidance?
Words of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Words of wisdom.
Well, I would say that definitely let yourself create anything that you feel called to create with no judgment, and don't be harsh on yourself. Like, everybody throws, like, probably 90% of the work that I do, maybe even 95% of it goes in the garbage. It's not the final thing that you see. So don't be afraid to make a mess. Don't be afraid to have fun. And if you go ahead with your creative work, please connect with your inner child. Children have no judgments. They have no boundaries. And that child part of us, when we can keep that alive, that's how we can connect with spirit and with our higher self in the most pure way. So I just wish you happy creativity. I'd love to see what you do. I'm on Facebook as well and Instagram, so I'd love to connect with you there.
Love that.
Well, thank
Absolutely
you for
love that.
being on with us.
Yes, thank you. Hey guys, thanks for watching. And hey, if you like what you see, subscribe to the channel, invite your friends. That's how we spread. Raise vibrations, and until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.